All right, back again here with another video talking about the NBA. There's a lot of stuff going on with tanking in the NBA, especially because earlier this month, the Utah Jazz and Indiana Pacers got fined for sitting their starters in the fourth quarter. And I think I know where that's going in terms of why the uproar is there. But there's been a lot of stuff. Adam Silver has been gung-ho in front of press conferences talking about how we're going to try to fix tanking and address these things, and it's disgusting, and he's sick of it and tired of it, and I understand that stuff. But let's get into the real issue with tanking here. Teams tank because they have to. It's not an accident. What team like Washington, Indiana, Utah, Memphis, New Orleans, what players are going there in their offseason, free agents, even when those teams have cap space and signing with them? None. If you look at the history of the NBA, a third of the league is always trash. It's always bad. That's not going to change because there's just a talent disparity. A lot of these teams can compete. They might be able to do some stuff early in the season and make it look competitive, but overall, it's going to weigh out that these top teams beat them. Maybe these bottom teams get lucky once in the blue. And when you look at these teams, Washington, Indiana, Utah, Memphis, New Orleans, Brooklyn, what's the max games that they're honestly going to win in each conference? Even when people say the Eastern Conference is weak or whatever the case may be, injuries happen and stuff like that, at max 30, 32 games, if you look out through the history of the league, teams that are at the bottom that suck win about 17 to 32 games. That is what's going to happen. But let's get into some things that the owners. Recently, Matt Ishbia has come out and said that people who are tanking are losers. And it's purposely done, associated, embarrassing for the league and organizations. And to talk about this strategy is ridiculous. If you're a bad team, you get a good pick, that makes sense. But if you're purposely shutting down players, purposely losing games, it's a disgrace that impacts the integrity of the league. I'm going to skip over the rest of the mumbo jumbo. This guy is the same guy that traded all his assets for Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal and try to make all this stuff happen, and it shit the bed and it looked bad and it didn't work out. The only reason why he's saying this is because he doesn't control any picks until 2032. So 2026 until 2032, he does not control his own picks. They're controlled by a combination, I believe, Brooklyn, Memphis, and Houston. So he can't tank. He can't utilize this method to tank and get better because he doesn't own his picks. There's no incentive for him to do so. But if he did do so, he would probably trade everybody. He would probably trade Devin Booker. Or if he did keep Devin Booker, he would be able to pair him with A.J. Demancia, Darren Peterson, the Boozer guy from Duke, etc., etc. He would be in position to do so. So with this whole talk about, hey, this is loser mentality and we shouldn't do this stuff, that doesn't make any sense because if he had his picks and had his way, he traded Kevin Durant. He got rid of Bradley Beal. There was conversations of what Devin Booker was going to happen, and then they extended him for $70 million. It's no accident. Like, if they had their picks, he would be tanking too. That's the number one thing about Matt Ishbia that I have an issue with, is that he put his franchise and threw all his assets away, and then he got somehow hoodwinked and got figured a way out to get Dylan Brooks and make all this makeshift stuff happen. Jason Ott was a great hire, and now they're not tanking anymore. Because if you did lose, there would be no incentive for you because you wouldn't have any picks. The one thing I'll say about Matt Ishbia that I do like is how he created the local network television out there in Arizona so locals can watch Phoenix Suns games. So that's dope. I give him credit for that. But this tanking situation, cut the shit, man. If you had your picks, you would be tanking too. All right, so let's get into looking at what Mark Cuban, who's recently trying to find a group to buy back the Mavericks because of everything that's going on. He had his quotes on tanking as well. We didn't tank often, only a few times in 23 years, but when we did, our fans appreciated it, and it got us to where we can improve, trade up, and get Luka and improve our team. The NBA should worry more about fan experience than tanking. It should worry more about pricing out fans' games than tanking. You know who cares about the least about tanking? A parent who can't afford to bring their 3 kids to a game and buy their kids a favorite jersey of their favorite player. Tanking isn't the issue. Affordability, quality of the game, presentation are. And that hit the nail right on the head. The NBA this year has gotten presentation right, especially going to NBC, going to Amazon Prime, getting these local outlets where they can stream the games and people can find them a little bit more easier without cable. The All-Star game had over 46 million views across the 3-day weekend, the most since what I think they said in 10, 11 years or something like that, because the game is more accessible. That makes sense. Now, affordability of ticket prices, jerseys, that is true. It is harder to get into NBA games, especially if you don't have connections or you don't have deals, et cetera, et cetera. And it isn't like this is a problem across all sporting events, because that's happening in wrestling too with WWE and them pricing out families and stuff like that. But in the NBA, it isn't like they're selling an adult ticket and a kid ticket. That's not happening anymore. They're selling one ticket for one ticket, and they're pricing it out. A lot of these people can't afford to go to games, so you're not getting the ravaging fan base that you got in the 80s and the 90s and stuff like that before they started pricing out. These contracts are getting bigger, arenas are getting more expensive, players are getting more expensive, things are getting more expensive everywhere around. And that usually gets passed down to the consumer in the NBA because you're paying the ticket to get into the game. That is a big thing. So the NBA has the presentation now. Now, affordability and quality is the thing that the NBA has to work on. And I think that's a work in progress. Hopefully they can get this ironed out. But these tanking measures don't make any sense. Okay, so Shams came out and said that this is what they were talking about in the meetings that they had at All-Star Weekend. First round picks can only be protected in the top 4 and top 14 plus. Lottery protection, so you're going to punish teams who are making smart trades and getting these lottery protections and basically getting their picks in the right space. I don't like that. Lottery odds freeze at the trade deadline or a later date. So basically, you're meaning that teams are going to tank outright at the start of the season and make the quality of the product worse by starting those dates. That doesn't make any sense. No longer allowing a team to pick in the top 4 in consecutive years or after bottom 3 finishes. This is the only thing that I agree with on this list, because I believe that it should be like Cleveland did this a couple years where they got those lottery picks and people are like, how the hell did they keep getting these picks, especially after LeBron, Anthony Bennett, Kyrie Irving, guys like that. And I do agree with that. If you're picking that many times in the lottery, especially in the top 5, you need to be recycled out and somebody else needs to get in, because you shouldn't be doing this. By that time, you should be able to put or get together a roster, unless you have major injuries and stuff like that. You should be able to put or get together a roster that really helps you out. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Teams can't pick in the top 4 the year after making the conference finals. So this is just basically attacking the Oklahoma City Thunder and especially the Indiana Pacers, especially with those guys. Oklahoma City is in position to get another pick in the lottery because they have the Clippers pick. In Indiana, especially after losing Tyrese Halliburton, teams are angry at that. I don't know why, because those teams had injuries to their players. So it's like, okay, lottery odds allocated based on the 2-year records. That's just confusing. Lottery extended to include play-in teams. So these teams that are already in the playoffs, you're going to give them more chances to get better with the lottery? Don't agree with that, because teams who are bad and they need help. Flatten odds for all lottery teams. That makes no sense to me, because now if you're at the end of the lottery and you're like Dallas, you're going to have that Dallas situation where Dallas gets the number 1 pick again. And that really doesn't help the league get better, in my opinion. I don't like that at all. But let's get to the crux of the situation. All this is about is gambling. The shareholders reportedly were putting pressure on Adam Silver to address this and stuff like that. Shareholders, a lot of the stuff that's been happening in sports a lot of the times is gambling. DraftKings, FanDuel, all these gambling sites are now interjection and influencing the game on a deeper level. Because when these teams pull out, when these teams sit guys like that, the NBA has to answer for that, because now you're putting pressure on people who are gambling and losing their funds, right? Because people are gambling, putting a parlay in, and now they're pissed because they lose it. That's what it is. It's about gambling. That's all this is with the tanking issues, and they're trying to figure out ways to not have Terry Rozier or Joey Porter, the guy that got banned from Toronto. This is about gambling for the NBA, and this is about money for the NBA. If the NBA is smart, they'll leave it alone and figure out other ways to address this problem. But tanking isn't the issue. It's the fact that all these sports let gambling in.